But in chapter 4 here, we have an open door in heaven and an invitation to come. And a voice, which is the voice that John heard way back. We were talking way back in January now. Back in the chapter 1, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet. And now he hears that voice again. And the first voice, which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet, said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." There's an interesting phrase, after this. I mean, I can't think of a more open-ended time frame. It's even more open-ended than soon, as Jesus was often telling his disciples, soon these things will happen. And he never gave us when soon would occur, but after this is even more open-ended. And I think what we're supposed to get out of that is, and we're supposed to understand from all of that, is that what we're experiencing now all around us in this moment is the church age. That's what we've been working through in chapter 2 and chapter 3, is that this is the church age that is being talked about. All these letters to the churches that we've been looking at, and also what we're currently living out, all of this is basically then an interlude. That's not to say that it's not important, but in terms of the content of Revelation, what we're living in, the church age, is an interlude. And after that interlude is what will come in the future. So the interlude ends here in verse 1 of chapter 4 with after this. I think that's the only way really that you can read Revelation and make sense of all of the things that come. Now, that's not to say that it's going to be easy to make sense of all of the things that come. But otherwise, I think it becomes this jumbled mess, and there is certain indices in this jumbled mess that would make it quite disappointing if it is not to say that all of this is in the future. So everything after this in chapter 1, verse 4 is in the future. We, though, are still in the church age, and in a sense, then, we're living out chapters 2 and 3. And we still have time to repent and endure and hold fast and remember our first love and overcome and wake up and get back to the source of it all of those things that we've been looking at in those 7 letters. We still have time to do that, but the time will run out at some point after this. And after this means that everything that happens from chapter 4 all the way through chapter 22 of Revelation is the future. It's coming, but it has not happened yet. And it's the future for us, not just for John at the time, because the church age is still present and active. And so now we're going to see the beginning of after this. And we're going to see some of the most amazing, remarkable, incredible, astonishing, awesome visions that we could possibly fathom having as we look at the source of all things. And quite honestly, this is one of those passages where I wish I could do it justice. But some of you are going to leave today feeling quite disappointed that I didn't give you everything there is possibly to know about all of these things, because there's no way that we can know them. And in fact, I don't think that's the purpose of it. But look at this mind-blowing description in this vision. At once, I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne stood in heaven, with one seated on the throne. And he who sat there had the appearance of jasper and carnelian, and around the throne was a rainbow that had the appearance of an emerald. Now we're going to have to stop there, because I think that's really too much for us already. We're grappling with the language and imagining what isn't imaginable, really. Michael has been kind enough to give us an artist's perception of what he read there. I wish I could bring out to you how fantastic it really is, but I can't because I wasn't there. And not only was I not there, but I don't have the language for it. And in fact, you'll have to be satisfied then with the finite words and lips and writings of John. Because this vision just boggles the mind. There's no way for us to even fathom what it is that's going on here. John uses the only words that he has, and that's why we see the words that we see in there. We see one who has the appearance of, who is like, or is or uses the word as. Not that these things are direct one-to-one correlations, but it's the only way that he can define them. Because what John is giving us is a vision of God's glory and majesty in this chapter. Back when the kids were much smaller, we had the pleasure of being taken by Jenny's parents out to Hawaii. They rented a house on the beach on the Big Island. It was fabulous. 6 bedrooms, private pool, a private gate that went right down. There were steps from the sand at any moment. It was absolutely stunning in its location. And one day I was laying on a day bed beside the pool because, that's what you do when you have your own house on the beach. You just lay and lounge around all the time. I was laying in the daybed by this private pool, and the trade winds were tousling my hair. And in fact, it's still the screensaver on my phone of a picture through my toes looking out at the beach across the pool. And I was watching the kids splashing around in the pool, and I foolishly said, this is heaven. No, not even close. It was glorious, to be sure. It was beautiful, it was inspiring, it was everything that I wanted it to be at the time, but it was not heaven, not even close. Look at all the descriptions that you see here in chapter 4, and you know that anything that you say is heavenly is not even close to heaven. And as you read this and you get a sense as you read it that John is struggling to describe what he's seeing. Why? Because he's using the only language that he has. He's using physical descriptions to describe and identify spiritual things. Look at what it says in verse 2. At once I was in the Spirit. He wasn't physically in this place. He was in the Spirit. And behold, a throne stood in heaven with one seated on the throne. John is transported in the Spirit into the presence of God. And this is what he sees. It's spiritual things. But now you all need to stop. Stop it. Because right now, all of you are imagining a chair. You're looking at that word throne. But this isn't some throne made out of stuff like we normally think of. I doubt it's actually even a chair. Maybe it is, but I doubt it. See, we think of a throne as probably this intricately carved piece of wood. Maybe it's got a few pads on the seat and a pad on the back of it. Maybe it's oversized to just give it some more presence in the room. But it isn't the chair that makes it a throne. See, if you took my easy chair from my living room and transported it to Buckingham Palace and King Charles sat in it and used it as his chair when he received dignitaries, it would become a throne. Is it a throne right now? No, not in the slightest. It is the one who occupies it that makes it a throne. The seat doesn't matter at all. And so John is in the presence of the majesty and glory and presence of God. And that's what makes this a throne, because of the power and might and majesty of the one who abides there. And who is that? Well, Psalm 115 says, our God is in heaven. He does all that he pleases, speaking to God's sovereignty and his power and his might. Daniel 4:34 and 35 says, for his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing. And he does according to his will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand or say to him, what have you done? Why can't they say that to him? Because he's sovereign. This is the throne room that we're in right now. This is the presence of sovereignty. But it is the one who is seated there in that place that matters, not the throne room. That place doesn't matter at all if God is not there. He is the one occupying a place of sovereignty and is permanently unshakable in it, as the hymn by Walter Chalmers Smith attests. Immortal, invisible, God only wise, in light inaccessible, hid from our eyes. Most blessed, most glorious, the Ancient of Days, almighty, victorious, thy great name we praise. So John isn't describing a chair, because even if a chair is there, John can't even see it. He's describing the one who sits on the throne. Verse 3. And he who sat there had the appearance of jasper and carnelian, and around the throne was a rainbow that had the appearance of an emerald. From the throne came flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder, and before the throne were burning 7 torches of fire, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne was, as it were, a sea of glass, like crystal. Do you see him struggling with words? Trying to put this in this imagery, this impression that he's getting. And that's why he has to use words like the appearance of and like and as. He who was on the throne had the appearance of jasper and carnelian. Jasper today is kind of a milky white stone, but in biblical times, the best pieces of jasper were crystal clear like diamonds. Multifaceted, they sparkled in the light. Might have been mistaken as a diamond. Carnelian is a reddish-orange gemstone. But notice, he had the appearance of. That does not mean that he was made of gemstones. I think it's rather that the imagery was sparkling and multifaceted in a way that he couldn't describe. And so he's like, the only way that I have to describe this is to describe gemstones to you, so that you get an impression of what it is. And around the throne was a rainbow, but it's not a rainbow, because it has the appearance of an emerald, he says. It doesn't have the spectrum of color of a rainbow. It's green, apparently, and sparkly, apparently. So here's this light arcing around this throne room, and the presence and the majesty and the authority, and it's sparkly and it's bright and it's red and green and absolutely stunning is the impression that we're supposed to get. But note, in all of that, not one anthropomorphic term. In other words, not one, I saw his hands and I saw his eyes, and none of that. No descriptions of human physical features involved in this. Why? Because John is not tempted at all to write this vision as though he's seeing something human. He is not. This is much grander than something human. This is much more auspicious. John is relating the appearance of what he sees using this earthbound language as his only tool. And so he uses these terms, the appearance of, but he stays strictly away from anything that could be described as being human. John can't describe it. Who could? I couldn't. Nothing is like heaven. It's incomprehensible. And so John's using what he knows as a bridge to the unfamiliar for us. But comprehending what he saw is virtually impossible. It strains every definition. And no matter how well we could describe it, we'll always be wishing we could understand it better. So I apologize. We can't describe it any better. You're going to leave here dissatisfied because you want to know more. You want to see it for yourself. Yes, that's what I want. Because it is ineffably different than anything we know. And we would have to be caught up in the Spirit to see it ourselves and fathom it.